Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, firing up the live chat on a Saturday night, day 3 of the NFL draft. I have just looked over round 2, so I'm a little bit behind with rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 front and center this afternoon. And I've yet to look over those picks, but please join me for my 3 videos that I cut on the first round, selections 1 through, of course, 32, bookended by the 2 Heisman Trophy winners from the past 2 seasons, Baker Mayfield, Cleveland Browns, and the Baltimore Ravens selecting Lamar Jackson at 32. So looking at picks 33 through 64, and our emphasis here is on the big-time players out of the Power 5, because that's what we cover here at Mark Rogers TV. Most of all, although I have a few things to say about some of the group of 5 players, but if you catch me for most of my videos here and analysis, it centers on the Power 5, and I'll be monitoring the group chat to see if you have anything to add as we focus on the second round. So if you have any comments or questions or anything to say about the other rounds or the other selections, certainly chime in with those as well. But I'm just going to run through the second round here. So right out of the gate, of course, the Cleveland Browns, after selecting 2 of the top 4 picks in the first round, had 2 of the top 3 selections in the second round. This is what happens when you, number 1, have the worst franchise and team in the NFL, and secondly, when you hoard a draft pick, which is a good strategy. But in recent years, the Browns have been able to execute the first half of that strategy in gaining the selections, but then they don't make the right selections. Let's see what they do here. Austin Corbett, a guard out of Nevada, number 33 selection overall, allowed 0 sacks in conference play in his career. He has played both the center and the guard position and also the tackle position, so he's very versatile. The interesting thing here is, though, that right after Corbett was selected, the New York Giants went out and selected, with the very next pick, Will Hernandez, the UTEP guard. And if you listen to the scouts, if you listen to the guys on set, the Mel Kipers and Todd McShays, they love Will Hernandez, and the tape just jumped out in regards to his dominance in the ground game. So it would have appeared as though Hernandez would have been the selection over Corbett, but the Browns went with Corbett. The Giants then select Hernandez, big beefy guy, 49 starts at guard, and he makes his way into the NFL, not just into the NFL draft, but into the second round from a team that went 0-12 there at UTEP. So they needed more players like Mr. Will Hernandez, who just was the best offensive lineman at the Senior Bowl, and that's when his draft stock just went through the roof. All right, at pick number 35, this certainly a selection that most college football fans, you would have to not be a college football fan to be aware of Nick Chubb's accomplishments at Georgia as the primary running back, 8+ yards per carry as a freshman when he fired off his huge freshman campaign with 1,547 yards in relief of Todd Gurley. Then had some injuries affect him as a sophomore and junior. Then Nick Chubb, of course, with a fine final season as he decided to stay there at Georgia as a senior, 1,345 yards. He had touchdown seasons of 14 as a freshman, 15 as a senior. So he started explosively. Then he finished off his career in fine fashion, taking Georgia to the national championship game and the SEC championship. He's second all-time in the SEC in rushing. The pass protection is good. He's a tough, hard-nosed player. The character is first-rate for Nick Chubb, but he's not necessarily an explosive back. He's not a cut guy. He's not a guy that's going to wiggle for big yardage downfield because of the speed, the explosiveness, or the shiftiness, or the moves. That's not Nick Chubb. He's a plotter. He's a guy that's going to get you the tough yardage. And the Cleveland Browns, having finished 32nd and last in the NFL in points scored last year, certainly need a Nick Chubb. Although I will tell you the guy that I would have selected, he's a little bit later in the draft here. All right, let's get to the chat here. Big Poppy JT, my Steelers sucked We should have taken Lamar Jackson. Navy Thomas likes Lamar Jackson, though says overrated. Lamar Jackson, obviously a project, but he has a strong enough arm for the NFL, but making the decisions will be his big challenge. Ryan, hey, Mark, good draft for the Dogs. Yes, it certainly was. Now Tanner Lee to Jacksonville. What a waste of a choice. Big Poppy with not really. Big Poppy, most of the 6 to 7 round picks go to the practice squad or get cut. Now, hang on just a second. So we saw a statistic by ESPN that I just caught a few minutes ago that 65% of the rosters in the NFL, 65% are draftees in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds and undrafted free agents. So those portions of the draft do matter. Are most of these guys turning out to be stars or impact players? No, but they fill out the roster. They play on special teams. They play the backup roles. And obviously, injury is a huge factor in the NFL. Ryan jumps in with anyone else surprised that the Patriots drafted Danny Etling. I did not think that Danny Etling was going to be selected as an NFL quarterback, but the Patriots went out and got Etling. So Bill Belichick seeing something in Danny Etling, who took care of the football. Definitely took care of the football. And way back when, that same brain trust selected Tom Brady at pick 199. Derrius Guice, we'll talk about him in just a second as well. So let's pick it up with the Nick Chubb selection to the Browns at 35. Again, not an explosive back, not going to shake many defenders. He's going to get you the tough yards between the tackles. Not that he can't go outside, but at the next level, not going to be that kind of back for a Browns running game that definitely needs an upgrade. Darius Leonard don't know a whole lot about him out of South Carolina State. Going to stick with the Power 5 guys, and a really good one going to Indianapolis with pick 37 in Braden Smith out of Auburn, who played guard. He played right tackle. He was a first-team All-America in 2017. His strength and smart were certainly first-rate for the Auburn Tigers. Okay, Tampa Bay selecting at 38 gets the guy that I would have selected had I been Cleveland at 35 at running back, Ronald Jones, USC. 1,550 yards, 19 touchdowns this past year as a junior. What's surprising to me is that Ronald Jones was not a contributor, let alone a big play back out of the backfield as a pass receiver. He only caught 32 passes, 14 this past year, 32 total in his career. That has to change. He has the type of moves in the open field, the explosiveness, a home run hitter that would need to get out into space. So they've got to work on the hands and the route running for one, Ronald Jones. And it's something we've talked about with our USC guys on a number of occasions about Ronald Jones' ability to potentially be a force in the passing game, but certainly wasn't at USC. He goes to Tampa Bay, who was 29th in the NFL in rushing. All right. I love these discussions when you include the viewers. I love it as well. Navy Thomas. Derrius was drafted to replace Danny Amendola. So we'll get to that pick much later, focusing on the second round here. You guys can chime in with anything that really caught your eye over the weekend. All right. After Ronald Jones going to Tampa Bay, we have the Bears going with James Daniels at pick 39, Iowa center, nasty center, probably the best center in the draft, along with Braden Smith, of course, needs to improve his strength. That was the scouting report on James Daniels. Of course, being an offensive lineman, it's not necessarily where the eyes are drawn in watching all the games that I do on a Saturday afternoon, so I'll take their word for it, but certainly watch the tape on James Daniel going to the Chicago Bears. Denver seemed to have had a really good draft, and I think it really involves the first pick that they had in getting Bradley Chubb. I thought that the Chubb fell to them, and that was really advantageous for the Broncos. And then here at pick number 40, Courtland Sutton out of SMU. And although I'm focusing on the Power 5 guys, Courtland Sutton's a guy that I saw on a number of occasions, 76 catches for 10 touchdowns and 68 for 12 touchdowns his last 2 seasons at SMU. So it's 6'3", 218. He's got a frame. He's got the size and the build to really muscle up on defensive corners. And I looked at the games against the better opponents since he does play in one of the group of 5 conferences. So for Courtland Sutton against TCU, his first time out, 1 catch for nothing. And then against Central Florida this past year, 5 catches for 46 yards. So he had his 2 least productive games against the 2 best defenses he faced. Now, a lot of that, obviously, for wide receivers has to do with quarterback play and also has to do with the offensive line. But last year against TCU, he ripped up the Horned Frogs, who were not nearly as good defensively in 2016 as in 2017. 5 catches for $113 against South Florida. 13 catches for Courtland Sutton for $252. And against TCU last year, meaning 2016, 4 catches for $115. So he certainly can do it there. Big Poppy JT commenting on James Washington. We'll get to hear him in just a second. What do you think of the Panthers pick? Got these guys organized by round, first round, second round. Check out the first 3 videos where I dissect the first round, going through the second round right here. So I don't know off the top of my head who the Panthers selected. Of course, if we go back to the first round, we got DJ Moore out of Maryland, first wide receiver off the board. And we'll get to the Panthers' second pick here. So Tennessee with pick 41, pick that the Titans acquired from Oakland, get Harold Landry out of Boston College. And if you heard David Pollock's comments about Landry, he loves the first step off the ball, firing off the ball. Harold Landry, of course, he had his huge season as a sophomore and junior when he had 22 tackles for loss, 16 and a half sacks, 7 forced fumbles. If you caught the Boston College Bowl game 2 years ago against Maryland, he was a wrecking crew in that game and basically won the game for BC, was the defensive MVP in that game. Now, this past year, he had ankle issues, and for a defensive end who makes his money rushing the passer, that is going to spell trouble, and did for Harold Landry, who was very much compromised this past year with 5 sacks and 8.5 tackles for loss. But if he gets back on good wheels, Harold Landry to Tennessee, look out for him. How about Mike Gesicki? Not necessarily a tight end, listed as a tight end for Penn State, but he's going to make his money in the NFL catching passes downfield. And this panel, the set, basically laughed him off the videotape, off the scouting report, based on his blocking, which is just abysmal. So Mike Gesicki going to the Miami Dolphins out of Penn State, not a blocker. This guy played volleyball, was a basketball player, can go up and get the ball, and has exceptional hands, the best tight end hands in the draft. 48 catches, 5 touchdowns 2 years ago as Penn State went to the Rose Bowl. And then this past year for the Nittany Lions, 57 catches and 9 touchdowns. Okay, Ryan, wasn't the wide receiver name Traquan Smith or something? Traquan Smith, yeah, out of Central Florida. Big Poppy JT, I don't like Mason Rudolph. I'd rather have Lamar Jackson. So, of course, Mason Rudolph, pick 76 to the Steelers. Lamar Jackson not around at that point. We shall see how it plays out. But if you look at measurables in terms of arm strength and delivery and size for a quarterback, Mason Rudolph, he's going to learn from Big Ben, and he may have a chance to do big things in the NFL. He looks the part. All right, pick 43, Detroit Lions go with Carrion Johnson. And forever, the Lions have been abysmal running the football. Fewest rushing yards per game in the NFL going back to 2011, by far. They haven't had a 100-yard rusher for a game since Reggie Bush 3 or 4 years ago. Carrion Johnson out of Auburn, since Cam Petway went down late in 2016 after he had a remarkable stretch drive, ripping up SEC defenses for 250 a game. Carrion Johnson took over and didn't let Cam Petway back on the field as the number 1 back. He ran for 1,391 yards this past year, 5 yards per carry, 18 touchdowns for Carrion Johnson, a guy now with amazing talent, not one of those upper echelon backs, but a guy that could be very productive with the Detroit Lions, who need somebody. Big Poppy JT says Mike Gesicki will be great. Jimmy Graham has the same problem. Yes, he did at Miami, and it hasn't affected Jimmy Graham's draft stock nor his productivity in the NFL. If he can get some passes thrown his way in Seattle, much like he did New Orleans, he might be headed to the Hall of Fame. Reggie Bush, a beast in the 2013 season until he got injured. I was surprised Ronnie Harrison fell. Far more balanced safety in this class. All right, Jarek, Derrius Guice fits nicely with Washington, but I'm surprised he fell so far. He does have great character and great leadership. So you got to consider this. For most of the Power 5 schools, especially the upper echelon teams in those 5 conferences, most of them have 4 or 5 guys get drafted. You've only got 32 selections in the first round, only 64 in the first 2 rounds. There's a number of guys that we're unaware of as college football fans because we watch the skill position guys, and we might be unaware of offensive and defensive linemen in particular, and those guys rise from the ashes during this scouting process. And so there's only so many slots to go around when you think about how many players are drafted versus how many guys we think of as being premium players at the collegiate level. So when a guy's drafted 75th or 100th, it's really not that low if you think about it in those terms. Ryan, never really impressed by Derrius Guice. Okay, we will get to him in just a second. We're on the 44th pick. Second round, Dante Pettis, Washington wide receiver, goes to San Francisco. If you remember back to the Alabama-Washington playoff game, the Huskies only got on the board because Dante Pettis got Marlon Humphrey back on his heels, got him to bite, and then he went by him and scored the touchdown from Jake Browning on, I believe, the very first drive of the game for Washington. Then that was it for the Huskies. So give Dante Pettis his due for getting Washington on the board and averting the shutout against Alabama in the National College Football Playoffs the season before. 53 catches, 15 touchdowns that year, 15 touchdowns for Dante Pettis. Last year, 63 receptions, 7 touchdowns. And Dante Pettis, a really good player there at Washington. Okay, a guy that's kind of a polarizing player was selected by the Green Bay Packers at pick 45. Josh Jackson, Iowa cornerback, Big Ten defensive back of the year, 8 interceptions to lead the nation, returned 3 for touchdowns, ball hawking skills all over the place, goes to the Green Bay Packers. Okay, the scheme is going to have to fit him since he barely ran a 4.6. So they're going to have to use him in press coverage where he gets help from the zone scheme and from the safeties, because Josh Jackson is not going to be able to run with many NFL wide receivers on the outside down the field, or even slot guys completely down the field. So he's a scheme fit. Josh Jackson, 8 picks in college, 3 interceptions last year, Big Ten defensive back of the year. Pettis is going to be a good special teams player. Good point there, Ryan. Dante Pettis, one of the very best in returning punts in the Pac-12 over the past few seasons. Jarek says, I love that pick for the Packers. Jackson is a first-round talent that they got in the second round. So in terms of measurables, speed being the first measurable you look at for a defensive back, Josh Jackson not necessarily measuring there, but we've seen defensive backs and corners play in the NFL and play it extremely well, where the measurement in the 40 doesn't appear as though it's good enough for that guy to be on the field. Josh Jackson may just be one of those guys. All right, we go to Kansas City at pick 46. The Chiefs traded up specifically to go after Breeland Speaks, Ole Miss linebacker. Okay, the Kansas City general manager, Brett Veach, said this guy has long arms and he's extremely physical. He was a second-team All-SEC pick. He had 67 tackles, did Speaks, with 8 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. Ryan says, but isn't every Iowa player really a scheme player rather than star talent? Well, for the most part, off the top of my head, I would agree. Of course, Josie Jewell, the consummate college linebacker, will have to make up for his speed deficiencies with the Denver Broncos. And he was just drafted recently here in the last, round or two. No, actually, I believe Josie Jewell was a third rounder, and hopefully we'll get to him as well. You got Dallas Godert, the San Diego State or South Dakota State tight end. Don't know much about him, but had 18 touchdowns in 27 games. Inline guy and a slot guy. Very impressive on tape at that level for Philadelphia. Again, I'm focusing on the Power 5 guys. Whoops, I skipped down here. Got to jump back to the Breland Speaks pick, and then right after that, the Arizona Cardinals had pick 47 take Christian Kirk out of Texas A&M. Okay, star wide receiver. Everybody knows about Christian Kirk. 80, 83, and 71 receptions the past 3 years. Even with quarterback issues this past season at College Station, had 26 touchdowns, returned 7 punts and kickoffs for touchdowns. So he could be a factor there as well. What really impressed me is that Christian Kirk, with an issue at quarterback in the bowl game, Belk Bowl against Wake Forest, could have sat out. There was talk that he would sit out. Team got down 14-0. He pretty much brought them back with 13 catches, 189 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Let me correct myself. Texas A&M went up in that game 14-0. But Christian Kirk in his last collegiate game against a good Wake Forest defense, 13 catches, 3 touchdowns, and $189. All right, Navy Thomas. Baker will only last 2 years in Cleveland. If you catch my video on Baker Mayfield and the rest of the first 10 picks of the NFL draft, you'll get my thoughts on what Cleveland should have done there, which was basically either draft Sam Darnold and then Bradley Chubb at pick 4, or if they were going to go with the best player, Saquon Barkley, then they still could have gotten one of the 2 remaining quarterbacks, and most likely maybe one of those would have been Baker Mayfield. Probably would have been between the Joshes, Rosen, and Allen for the Browns. They didn't opt to do that. I think that was a big mistake. Not that they didn't get a really good corner, the best in the business in Denzel Ward, but they didn't get the best defensive player in Bradley Chubb, and they could have lined him up opposite Myles Garrett. All right, so we go to pick 48. The Los Angeles Chargers take Uchenna Nwasu, the outside linebacker out of USC, and he really burst onto the scene in 2017. So he was a productive, decent player throughout his career, and especially in 2016. Didn't play a whole lot his first 2 years, but in 2016, a good player. This past year, he was the number 1 linebacker in the nation in passes broken up, 13. He had 75 tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss, and 9.5 sacks for Nwosu. Really broke onto the scene, and it made him some money and got him a spot in the second round at pick 48. And we talked a whole lot about a ton of these players in our team reports with our various media contributors. So again, I'm going to stop down right now. I've got most of the regulars on board right here, but if you come across Mark Rogers TV right here for the first time, we cover college football like no one else, the voice of college football. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out the audio on Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. You guys love Lamar Jackson, especially Navy Thomas does, and so does, I know, Big Poppy. You love Lamar Jackson. It'll be an interesting case scenario with Lamar Jackson to see if the NFL has truly morphed into what college football has been over the past 10 or 15 years to be able to play that kind of quarterback and succeed. We shall see. All right. Great story here with Connor Williams, pick 50 out of Texas, staying in state to go to Dallas. So anytime you've got a University of Texas player going to play for the Dallas Cowboys, that's typically the love fest there for Texas football fans when they get one of their own playing Texas high school football, going to the University of Texas, and then going to the Dallas Cowboys. But for this guy, an incredible story of fight, of grit, of determination in being bullied as a junior high student, being in isolation because basically he was overweight and he had a speech impediment, had no friends, as it was described, and that motivated him to hit the weights, hit the workouts, hit the nutrition, and turn himself into a completely different person physically and turn into an NFL player 7 or 8 years later. Pretty amazing by Connor Williams, who played right tackle at Texas, probably the left guard with the Dallas Cowboys. All right. Who do we got here? Big Poppy JT. Do you know that the Ravens offensive coordinator is the same offensive coordinator when Vic played for the Falcons? I did not know that. NCIS Fanatic 21 chimes in on Lamar Jackson as well. Will not be a good NFL quarterback. He throws the ball like JT Barrett, Tyrod Taylor, and Kelly Bryant. Okay, I would distinguish those guys. Excuse me, for sure. Lamar Jackson has a strong enough arm to play quarterback in the NFL. It's not about arm strength. His accuracy is an issue, and his ability to use his eyes and make the right decision downfield and diagnose the defense. Although they had some interesting analysis on the ESPN set when Lamar Jackson was taken, that basically in pro style sets with the wide receivers going down and not the read option play, the RPO, that Lamar Jackson actually was a more accurate passer in those pro type schemes and sets than he was otherwise. We shall see. All right. Then at pick 51, Chicago takes Anthony Miller. They traded with the Patriots and they get the Memphis wide receiver. Very productive the last 2 years of his career, 95 catches, 14 touchdowns, and 96 and 18 touchdowns this past year. So what did he do against the really good defenses? Against UCLA this year, 9 catches for $185 and 2 touchdowns against Central Florida. And Mike Hughes, who is a high draft pick in this NFL draft, and of course Shaq Griffin, though he's playing linebacker, he's dropping into coverage at times. Anthony Miller ripped up Central Florida for 14 catches for $153 and 3 touchdowns, 195 yards and 3 touchdowns in the American Conference Championship game. Impressive stuff. The NFL is changing. Last year, 60% of offensive plays in the NFL were from the shotgun. Yeah, that does not surprise me. That's been the third down set for NFL teams for years. So there's a third of the plays right there. And now they're going to the spread formation more frequently, even when they run the ball. I don't think Lamar will do well. He can't throw the ball downfield. All right, maybe not accurately, but he can make the throws. He's got the arm strength to make the throws. All right, Indianapolis at pick 52 goes with Kamiko Toure, a defensive end out of Rutgers, who had an extremely productive freshman year. 8 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. That was his best year as a freshman in 2014. Since then, went down to 6 tackles for loss and 3 sacks as a senior, has had 2 shoulder surgeries, and really, he was off the charts. He was in a negative way, not necessarily off the charts. Positively, he was nondescript and not considered heavily for this type of status in the NFL draft was Toure until he went to the Senior Bowl and he just lit it up during Senior Bowl week. Tampa Bay at 53 takes MJ Stewart, a North Carolina defensive back. He's had a couple off-field issues that sound rather ugly. He's a press corner, very physical, not great speed or athleticism, but very physical in a press corner who knows what he's doing and has 6 career INTs. Staying in the secondary for the ACC, Jesse Bates taken by Cincinnati at 54. Wake Forest safety, 100 tackles 2 years ago, 77 tackles this past year, so he comes up and plays the run. He also was considered a center fielder. He did play the position technically in baseball, actually center field for the Wake Forest baseball team. He misses tackles. He picked off 6 passes in his career. Okay, a guy that is well known to college football fans by Carolina, taken at pick 55, Dante Jackson, DB LSU. Okay, 4.32 at the combine, then a 4.31 at his pro day at LSU. So he didn't shy away from the challenge of backing up that 4.32. Fundamentally sound, drops a lot of interceptions, only had 4 interceptions. The tape shows that he dropped a number of would-be INTs, but is loaded with talent and speed. Another SEC corner goes at 56. New England takes Duke Dawson out of Florida. Looks like he's going to be a slot corner. Grabs way too often, so the pass interference calls could come at the NFL level far more frequently for Duke Dawson than they did in the SEC. He had 4 picks in 2017, 6 career interceptions, 3 coming all the way back for pick sixes, and of course one of those against Iowa in that bowl route for the Gators 2 years ago. All right, Big Papi JT, how do you feel about Antonio Callaway to the Browns? I like the pick. Josh Gordon, who had similar problems, can help him. I don't know that Josh Gordon's necessarily in a position to help anyone right now. He needs help himself to stay on the straight and narrow. Once he gets to a place where he can stabilize his own career and professionalism, yes, maybe he is the perfect guy to be mentoring Antonio Callaway. Callaway is either going to make it big and be a bargain at that spot for the Browns, or they blew another pick. It's interesting to note that the Browns would go that route, considering all the issues they've had with wide receivers going off the rails, and players that had those issues before their NFL career started, that they would take that kind of chance. All right, next up, we've got PJ Hall out of Sam Houston State. These numbers are ridiculous, and they showed the game tape. Obviously, I've never seen this guy play out of Sam Houston State, going to the Raiders at 57, but 86 tackles for loss, 42 sacks, and 14 blocked kicks. Crazy. Okay, Atlanta Falcons at 58 take Isaiah Oliver, Colorado defensive back, a decathlete. So he's an athlete. If you can major in the decathlon, yes, speed, length, just a tremendous athlete. But interesting to note that in his career, this Colorado defensive back, Isaiah Oliver, has 0 tackles for loss and 0 sacks. He is sticking in coverage and only picked off 3 passes. All right, finally get to a guy that you guys have been talking about here for quite some time. Derrius Guice out of LSU. Ran for 1387 and 1251 the past 2 seasons, with 29 total touchdowns the past 2 years. So the productivity's off the charts. He's 5th all-time in LSU rushing. He's 2nd in SEC history at 6.5 yards per carry. He led the SEC, or was first team All-SEC in 2016 and 17. And if you really want the big game, the home run game, this isn't going to factor into his NFL career, but it's just a side note. 3 250-yard rushing games for Derrius Guice, and he did it against big-time competition. So what do you guys think about Derrius Guice? He went to, of course, the Washington Redskins. I think Guice is going to be a serviceable back, not a star, a guy that runs for 500 or 600 yards per season, is a guy that gets minimal carries, but is a contributor. All right, NCIS Fanatic 21 talking some hockey. All right, the Browns should be bought out by Columbus. Change the name to the Blue Jackets. Come on, this is NFL history. This is a historic franchise. They just need somebody in there to run the franchise. But, man, the Cleveland Browns have to stay the Cleveland Browns. You know, that's Green Bay Packers, New York Giants, Chicago Bears kind of turf. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers at pick number 60 take James Washington. Mason Rudolph coming up a little bit later at pick 76, James Washington. So he's got a comfort zone right there. One season ago, the Pittsburgh Steelers took Juju Smith-Schuster in the second round, and he really lit it up this past year. James Washington is a black belt. He's the Blitnikoff Award winner, all-around athlete. And this didn't necessarily turn out burner type 40 times at the combine or his pro day, but that's what he's known for at the collegiate level. He looks lightning fast. He burns guys straight down the field. Just a bit of a shake and gone. 28 catches, 53, 71, and 74 in his 4 years at Oklahoma State. Just a shade under 20 yards per reception and 39 touchdowns. Not a whole lot of guys graduate from college with 39 touchdown receptions. Ryan thinks Guice was overrated. How does it feel to have Baker as your quarterback since he completely disrespected Ohio State? Talked about Baker on my video. Check it out. All right. Compared to Johnny Manziel, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, those are the three comparisons I made for various reasons, for very different reasons. Baker Mayfield moving to the Cleveland Browns. Okay, let's pick it up with pick number 62. Minnesota goes with Brian O'Neill, the Pitt offensive tackle. And if you look at the tape, as we did on draft day, this would have been on Friday night. This guy's a really good athlete to the point, this offensive tackle, they had him throw the ball twice. They ran him around the end a couple times for 29 yards this past season, ran him as a junior, but he's going to be an offensive tackle. So let's not get wowed by his athleticism. He's not very physical or strong. That needs to change for Brian O'Neill. I don't know why he was drafted this high. All right, Tampa Bay at 63 takes Carlton Davis, the Auburn defensive back. He had 3 interceptions as a freshman and then won the rest of his career. No sacks, no tackles for loss, didn't disrupt anything in the backfield, wasn't asked to do that at 6'1", 203. And the final selection I'll talk about here in the second round live stream is Tyquan Lewis, Ohio State defensive end. Goes to Indianapolis. First team All Big Ten selection in 2016 and 17. Didn't test well. That's why Tyquan Lewis was a marginal second round pick. Did not test well. When it's game time on Saturday afternoon and now Sunday, Tyquan Lewis shows up. 14, 10.5, 9.5 tackles for loss the past 3 seasons, 8, and 7 sacks, playing sometimes on the interior for an Ohio State defensive line that mixed and matched because they had so much talent and wanted to get fresh bodies constantly on the field. Tyquan Lewis, not a specimen when it comes to measurables in a combine situation, but a guy that just shows up and makes plays when the whistle blows. So that's my second round analysis. I'll continue to take comments and questions right here as you guys are really riding the Lamar Jackson argument. Jamie says Lamar is perfect for the Ravens. The Ravens spend a lot of defense and need a quarterback who can raise the talent of the offense. Flacco's biggest problem is he needs a lot of talent to play well. Maybe Thomas Scott Frost drafted to be quarterback for Cleveland. How you feel about Orlando Brown? Orlando Brown's a tremendous player who dropped because of one of the reasons why we just pointed it out in the case of Tyquan Lewis. Orlando Brown, his performance on the field, his game tape is tremendous. Look at the Georgia defense. Look at the Oklahoma offensive production, especially in the first half and the fourth quarter. They had a rough third quarter, but against NFL players, NFL caliber talent on the other side, Orlando Brown was one of the big reasons why Oklahoma flourished in that game. And overall, Orlando Brown's a tremendous player, goes to the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, he's not an elite tackle because the measurables aren't great. He's not a high-end elite athlete, but he learned how to play the position extremely well. Dennis Wilson. Valdez Mosley still think Miami got Mickey Mouse offense. I didn't think so, buddy. So some of these conversations between you guys, I love it, but I'm not going to dive in on some of this stuff where I don't know what you guys are talking about at this point. So anyway, that's my second round analysis, going 33 all the way through pick number 64. If I have the time to dissect the future rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I will do so. Otherwise, of course, in the next few days, we will get back to it on college football. So I want you guys to know that tomorrow on Mark Rogers TV, we go with Steve Dace of Michigan, going to talk about Shea Patterson's eligibility as ruled by the NCAA and what that means for Michigan football. And we'll size up the Wolverines after spring football. And I'm sure Steve will have some thoughts about the NFL draft as well. We're talking Texas football tomorrow with Steve Helwick of SB Nation. And also we've got Teddy Tate is joining us, and we'll talk more NFL. So we're going to go live stream across the board, except for some of my personal analysis where I line up the big board and break down schedules and such. Most of the content coming to you going forward is going to be on the live stream so I can hear from you guys while I'm talking. This is how I like to do it best. So Ryan, Navy Thomas, Dennis, Big Poppy JT, all you guys, I don't want to miss anyone, but I appreciate you jumping on board for second round of the NFL draft analysis, and we'll come back with so much more. Predictions, Ryan, those, I'm a guy that just needs to think about that till the last possible time. So Wednesday or Thursday of the final week of the off season. So late August for the college football predictions. All right. Jamie wants to talk about the Ducks. Talk Ducks if I want some views. Jamie, you're going to promise me views if I talk about the Oregon Ducks. Well, regardless of views, I've got to talk Oregon football. I have tried so many times to get different media contributors on to talk Oregon. So I have not been lucky there, but we'll get to Oregon football when I get some response there. All right, guys, appreciate you jumping on. Of course, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking of the game we love 24/7, 365. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give me your comments, suggestions on content, and of course, your questions as well. And I will see you guys soon. Appreciate you jumping online.